Hello everyone, my name is Derrick Broze. I'm also running for mayor of Houston. As far as the environmental aspect of my campaign, it's a big part of what I'm focused on. For one, I just want to mention, if you haven't heard my name yet, check out derrickbroze.com to find out more about what we're doing. We're definitely running as the underdog outsider candidate, but we're talking about issues that no other candidates and no other campaign are touching on, including the approach that I'm taking to the environment. So a few areas that really are concerning me, and I guess that they all stem from the main concern, which is that the changes in climate and the future of Houston is not being taken seriously by the people in charge currently. We just keep thinking we can build buildings different, or we can make these small incremental changes, even in our own individual lives. But we're not accepting the fact that Houston, the surrounding areas are either at sea level, below sea level, or just barely above it. This is something that we're going to have to deal with in the coming decades, in the coming years, facing the fact that we are living in an unsustainable city, and there are changes that need to be made, but I think it has to start with that acceptance of that reality, that the way that the city's been built, the way that we've torn down all the green spaces and built up so many buildings is now coming back to haunt us. So as part of my campaign, one of the big things we're calling for is to identify vacant lots around the city of Houston, to turn them over to neighborhoods for more community gardens, more food forests, more urban farms, and this is something I've been actively engaged in for the last decade, working as the last organic outpost in the 5th Ward, putting my hands in the soil and building community gardens around Houston and seeing the value it brings to Houston as well as the green space. We're also talking about bringing industrial hemp farming to Houston now that it's legal in Texas as of a few months ago, to make Houston a hub for hemp as well as other native plants that we can plant along the bayou to help reduce flooding, reduce erosion, and also talking about decentralization and permaculture. I hope to talk more about these ideas today. Thank you for your time. I'll just keep my answers short and sweet. I think there were a few ideas that were mentioned that are worth considering or continuing. Of course, more air quality testing. I like the idea of more testing and sensors in different neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods right near the refineries. More transparency, as Mr. Baker mentioned, and of course communication. One thing that I see, say for example, with the most recent fires that have happened, when these fires happen and they say it's blowing west 30 miles or whatever, and you're in the direct line of it, like my house has been the past couple of fires, you have a choice to either listen when the health authorities, the Texas state authorities, or the local government say, there's nothing to worry about, the air quality is fine, we promise there's nothing in there, and trust them. But in my experience, most people don't. Most people are very skeptical of this claim that just when a fire happens and chemicals are released into the air, that we're all fine, there's nothing to worry about. So I think that does show a lack of trust in the current administration as well as just the local city government. People want to feel safe and they don't currently feel safe. I think one big step outside of the aforementioned solutions by the other candidates, that Houston needs to start representing the will of the people in a more direct fashion. And what I mean by that is I think that Houston should not be contracting, partnering, whether that means for city events or literally contracting financially with businesses, companies, corporations, countries, nations, any of these institutions that have been involved with environmental disasters and responsible for environmental damage in Houston or around the world. So whether that means down in the Amazon, down in the Gulf of Mexico, whether that means elsewhere, we shouldn't have the city of Houston partnering with Shell. We shouldn't have the city of Houston partnering
That's
with
right.
We shouldn't have the city of Houston partnering with these organizations. So that's one big step. When you recognize there's pollutants in the air, that we need to start finding ways to actually penalize those companies. Maybe start with ending the contracts with them. Thank you. I think at this point everyone understands we're dealing with multiple types of flooding, the flooding from the street as well as flooding from rains and hurricanes and things of this sort. As I mentioned earlier, I have a plan that we're calling Hemp Houston that is to bring more green spaces into Houston. As I mentioned, hemp is now legal in Texas as well as other plants that I think we could use. Both hemp, I'm working with local students focused on this particular area who are helping me fully develop this plan using native plants, using bamboo as well as hemp for all along the bayou as well as other areas. And I mentioned earlier, food forests, community gardens. The whole thing is about re-greening Houston and making more green space, which is going to help with absorbing that water, and along the bayou it will help with reducing erosion and reducing the flooding. I've been down in the bayou, the Buffalo Bayou Partnership. I've been out there helping them clean. Another big part of this, as it pertains to the bayou, is to clean out the bayou itself, which seems like a really simple, common sense answer that I don't see a whole lot of movement on. Cleaning out the cars, the debris, everything that's in the bayou, as well as the debris that flows into the drainage. And as Mr. Baker mentioned, we have a problem, mismanagement, it seems, with funds. This is being finally reported on by local media just in the past week, how your tax dollars, you're being told they're going for one area to fund one project, and surprise, surprise, they're apparently not. So we have to take care of all of those issues. For one, regreening Houston, bringing that green space back, encouraging each of you to have more gardens and more green space in your areas, as well as when it comes to building, like I-45, discouraging that type of building, which is only going to make the flooding worse, and then again, making sure the funds that are supposed to go towards flooding actually go there. Thank you. So addressing the question, air quality, healthcare, I do agree more communication between the county, state, federal levels, trying to figure out how to work that situation out to make it more where people like yourself who are in need help, especially dealing with air quality, with asthma and allergies. This is like an everyday issue for myself as well. I think it does go to the question of what the proper role of government is, whether or not the city government should be engaged in that, or if the city has jurisdiction in that way, but whether or not there's actual jurisdiction, I think again, communicate the needs of people like yourself, working directly with people like yourself to find the solution is what needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for addressing the issue of housing. As somebody who makes less than $60,000 a year, who's also a felon from 15 years ago and understands what it's like to basically only be able to rent in the 5th Ward, which I'm thankful to be in the 5th Ward, but it's maybe not the best place always to be in. It's not always, my neighbors don't necessarily have an option for other housing. They're being priced out. This is happening all over the East End, really all over Houston. Everybody's seen it. And I think that when it comes to addressing the intersection of how these issues relate to the climate, we can't ignore that the more pollution we get, the more people who are affected in the poor, lower-income communities like the East End, like Manchester, like the communities near the refineries. Those are the folks who are not only are going to deal with being priced out of other areas, so the only places they can live is going to be near these refineries, but when they move there, they're also dealing with higher rates of cancer, they're dealing with higher exposure to pollution and things of this sort. I think the city, what we could start to do is to create a new program that can incentivize developers not to just move in with these. I mean, for me, I just see townhomes going up everywhere. They're 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 in the East End and 5th Ward, right next to areas that I know my neighbors and I maybe won't even be able to afford to live there within 6 months or so once those prices start going up. I think the city could incentivize these developers and builders to relocate those type of housing to other areas and to work with the residents there. I'm not going to sit here and say I have a perfect plan and I know exactly what it looks like, but I think the conversation is definitely something that needs to happen, especially as it relates to the climate and to the changing of the environment in Houston. Again, Manchester, all the areas that live near the refineries, they have the highest rates of cancer. Those folks don't necessarily have the option to just pick up and leave whenever they want to. So we need to find a solution for that, and I hope to do that with you. Thank you.
For all Houstonians as we work to afford a more equitable and sustainable future.
Is that final question?
Correct.
All right, I'll use it well. Well, environmental justice, I would say, it's one of the things that brought us all here. Even if we asked every single person in that room, we might get a different answer from each person. But generally, I think it's the individual person who realizes that the justice for us as individuals, the justice for our world, the truth and justice that many of us seek, the reason we get politically engaged or apolitically engaged is because we want some sense of truth and justice in the world. Now, as it relates to the environment, more and more people are realizing that environmental causes are not just in a vacuum. They intersect with a lot of other issues. For example, for me, the environmental issues intersect with my anti-war stance. The U.S. military is one of the biggest pollutants in the world, and I think there needs to be more action on that. But as far as climate justice, it's the idea that we can achieve some sense of justice in the world, some sense of balance and equity, as you mentioned, through taking care of the earth and through taking care of the environment. And again, I would point back to the indigenous communities around the world that have taught us this for generations, to start living in harmony and living in balance with the planet. And most of us are not doing that, and that's not a judgment or attack on anybody, but we're not doing that on the individual level, much less the city level. So if we're going to ever have environmental justice, actual true justice, it's going to have to start, once again, from the ground up, from the bottom up, within each of your own hearts and minds. Because we can create new bureaucracies and create new departments and pass new ordinances and do all these things, but if the people of Houston do not change their own behavior, their own individual behavior, then nothing else will change. It's just going to come through force from the top up instead of from the bottom up. So I encourage each of you to start thinking about what environmental justice means to you, how we acquire that, how we move forward, thinking about equity, thinking about justice, thinking about the planet, thinking about the generations coming after us, and doing that and balancing that with, I say, the tradition of individual liberty that we have in the United States. Thank you.